Very good. All right, today welcome to the Pigments 101 webinar. This month we are going to focus on the remaining, excuse me, the remaining families of the polycyclic high performance pigments in this category. And as we've done before, I am recording this webinar, so all of the participants today will get the link towards that recording, as well as the PDF of the presentation. And if you have any questions along the way, please use the chat box, and we will take care of those at the end of the technical presentation. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. As we were talking about the polycyclic, there are many chemistry families within this group of organic pigments. We have talked about in the past in separate webinars the DPP chemistry as well as the quinacridone chemistry. As far as the important classes that are commercially available, I've highlighted here those that are the most important: the dioxane, the DPP, the isoindolin, the isoindolinone, the quinacridone, and the quinophthalone pigment families are of most importance from a commercial aspect of it. However, all the other ones are still available in the marketplace. So as I mentioned, we in January we've done the DPP chemistry, and in April we took care of the quinacridone chemistry individually. So today we'll review briefly each of the remaining chemistries in the polycyclic grouping of high performance pigments. However, if you missed the DPP or quinacridone webinars, just shoot me a note and let me know, and I will be glad to share the link for the recording as well as the slides for those as well, so that you are fully complete with respect to the polycyclic chemistries. So at this point, because there's so many different families within this grouping of organic pigments, I just wanted to spend a moment or two to give you a brief synopsis of what makes each of these families of pigments unique. So we'll start out with the anthraquinone. These pigments provide a medium to high strength and good transparency. They also bring towards your formulation good heat, light, and migration fastness, and they have good to excellent weather fastness. A popular color index in this one is the pigment red 177. The dioxane pigment, family of pigments, and the most popular here is the pigment violet 23. These have very high tint strength, have a wide range of shade and opacities. However, the most relevant are in the violet color space. And they have good heat, light, and migration fastness, and medium to good weathering. The indanthrone, actually the indanthrone chemistry is part of the anthraquinone family of pigments from a chemistry perspective, but because the pigment shade is so unique in this blue shade that we have in the pigment blue 60, we tend to separate this out from the anthraquinone family. The isoindolin, this family spans the yellow, orange, red, and brown color spaces. This family is a little bit more unique than others because the physical properties of this class on the color behavior is much more pronounced than other classes of pigments. Primarily, with the opacity. So the opaque pigments tend to have a lower strength versus the transparent pigments in this class of pigments. The isoindolinone they provide medium to high strength, typically are green to red shade yellows, and a couple of oranges exist in this color family. They have excellent heat, light, and migration fastness, and excellent weathering properties, especially with TiO2 at low concentrations of organic pigment. This is unique in that chemistry because of the TiO2 photodegradation properties. The isoindolinone chemistries are resistant to the photodegradation. So if you need a red shade yellow pigment in this space, but you also have a high exterior weathering demand, then the isoindolinone chemistry, pigment yellow 110, for example, is the chemistry of choice that will meet your technical needs in this particular area. The Perylene offer high strength with good heat resistance and light fastness, excellent weather fastness. The Perylenes, this is a rather limited but unique class of pigments. They offer high strength and high weather fastness and heat stability. The quinothalones offer excellent light fastness, good resistance to solvents and migration fastness, as well as heat stability. And lastly, the thioindigo class occupy the red, violet to maroon and brown shades. They tend to offer excellent, good to excellent light weather and migration fastness, as well as solvent stability. Now, with respect to the color indexes that make up these particular families, in here, you'll start to notice that there are fewer and fewer options in each of these chemistry families, and that is really because of the unique chemistry structures that these pigments have, and the properties and color that they bring towards your formulation. So the anthraquinone, as I mentioned earlier, probably the more more relevant one is the red 177. Obviously, with the dioxazine pigment, the pigment violet 23 is one that makes up the predominant of this family. Indanthrone, of course, is just the pigment blue 60. The isoindoline, the primary one here is the pigment yellow 139. And the isoindolinone is a couple of yellows space, primarily the pigment yellow 110 and an orange space with the orange 61. The Perylene is primarily in the pigment orange 43 as well as red 194. The Perylene group has a lot more in this class. But they tend to be a little bit more niche use or more limited use in here. Probably some of the more popular in this class of pigments are the pigment red 179, and I've marked off a couple of color indexes: the red 189 and the red 228. These have fairly recently been removed from a commercial aspects for various reasons. And then the two blacks, the black 31 and the black 32, these are, as I indicated, have much more of a niche type of usage for the purpose. The quinothalone is the pigment yellow 138. You might see some references to in the literature for an orange and brown colors. These have been developed as assigned color indexes, but none of these have been commercialized to the extent of other pigments. The thioindigo is also a very small class of pigments. Again, I mentioned here that the red 181 has a very limited application in use. For today's talk, here I've highlighted the color indexes that we'll spend some time on and reviewing, so that you get a sense of each of these chemistry families and what they bring to your color development needs in your applications. So this class, the polycyclic class of organic pigments, is pretty unique, and primarily it's because of the chromophore moieties that are embedded in this polycyclic structural frame. So I just put a few for these color indexes here on this slide, just so that you can see the polycyclic structural frame that we're talking about. They are, my colleague likes to say the little chicken wire, and this is a group of pigments that is definitely that chicken wire definition in here. But so when you see something that looks like this, then you might recognize that as being in the polycyclic class of pigments. However, this class accounts for less than a quarter of the world's organic pigment by volume, but a larger number in terms of the value of this particular of this class of pigments. Primarily, these pigments combine both a high value with their high performance property aspects of it, which gives you a much higher value in use, especially when compared to, say, a classical azo pigment in a similar color space. These pigments will give you a much greater value in use when you're comparing in your formulations. From a use perspective, I don't have a lot of details in this particular slide, primarily because all of these pigments in this class are used in every application area. And so in the little bit more of the details area, I give you a little bit more specifics about where each one is being used. But just suffice it to say that all of these pigments are used in all applications for that. So we'll start off with the anthraquinone. Here we'll discuss the pigment red 177. This is a medium, mid to blue shade red pigment, which provides an overall good, excellent fastness and resistance properties. It's useful for all of the application areas, coatings, plastics, and inks. It does have a good transparency to it, so it makes it an ideal companion in the red space for using along with effect colorants. It allows for a nice deep color to the eye, as well as allowing the sparkle effect of colorants like micas and aluminums to show through in your colored formulation. For Pseudosham, we have a couple of products, one that we've created for the coatings area and one created for the plastics area. You'll notice the heat stability is set at 260 degrees C, so it will behave well for a majority of the plastic polymers that are in use in this particular area. For those of you who like the TEM pictures that I brought before, suffice to say that I have them here for each of these areas as well. The pigment red 177, being on the transparent side, is going to be very small in size. In this particular product, the average diameter is about 32 nanometers, so quite small. Moving on to the dioxazine chemistry, the pigment violet 23. This is a very blue shade violet pigment. It has very high color strength, making it a very useful colorant as a shading component. It has excellent heat and light fastness, which makes it suitable for a lot of coatings and inks applications. Going back to the high strength property of this one, this can be a positive as well as a negative. It just makes it more difficult to handle in terms of color accuracy or weighing accuracy in your formulation. A lot of people in the industries like to make a lower strength version of this particular pigment so that they can get better color accuracy in their weighing operations, or maybe even in the plastic sides, making a low pigment loading master batch to help with that that color accuracy aspect of it. As far as Pseudoshan is concerned, we currently don't have Violet 23 products today. However, we are in the final stages of our new manufacturing plant for this chemistry. We expect this plant and the products coming out of it to be available to us in late this year. We will have products in all 3 application area. Suffice it to say that this is great news for Pseudoshan, as it provides us a new chemistry into our portfolio. However, for the US, it is a little bit more challenging because of the anti-dumping duties that are applied to imports from India and China into the US of this chemistry. However, if you have manufacturing outside of the US, say in Canada and or Mexico, those anti-dumping duties don't apply. So we can certainly help you in those scenarios for the Violet 23 chemistry products as they come on board later this year. Pigment Blue 60, Indanthrone. This is a very red shade blue pigment. This chemistry is known for resulting in a very red flop or color travel, especially in the coatings area. This could be a positive thing in your color formulation, or it can be a very difficult aspect to manage in developing a new color in there. This chemistry offers excellent light and heat resistance properties and good weather fastness and transparency. Primarily, it's used in coatings and some inks for these unique coloristic aspects of it. It is useful for some a more limited plastic polymer space in here, so we just need to match up the chemistries and the heat profiles with your application needs. Isoindolone, pigment yellow 139 this is a red shade yellow pigment. This chemistry is very good for light fastness and heat stability, and as well as chemical resistance. Its primary usage is in coatings. However, it does have an application in both plastics and inks as well. This chemistry is typically offered in both opaque and transparent grades. However, the opaque is probably the more prominent grade in this chemistry. From a Pseudoshan perspective, we have a couple that we offer in the coatings area as well, and one offering in the plastics area, which is the transparent grade. But notice that it has a lower heat resistance of 240 degrees C. So that will limit the base of the polymer chemistries that this can be used in. However, this is a good place to repeat the comments that I've said in other webinars. in that just because this 2939K transparent version of yellow 139 was developed in the plastics area, it's not to say that it would not work in coatings and inks, where a transparent yellow 139 might be useful for you. It's always, again, going back to that balance, matching up your needs with the actual pigment colorant itself. So just to give you a feel for what the difference between an opaque and a transparent pigment is in terms of the crystals, shape, and size. So both of these have similar shape in that they are a little bit more barrel-like with the aspect ratio nearing 2, so about twice as long as it is wide in here. However, the diameter is what makes the difference between the opacity. The opaque version is about 128 nanometers, whereas the transparent grade gets its transparency from its very thin diameter at 48 nanometers on average in here. So that's where the difference in opacity comes from, is that narrowness of the crystal. Moving on to isoindolinone. Here we'll review the pigment yellow 110. This is also a red shade yellow pigment, a little bit redder than the yellow 139. However, it has excellent light fastness properties and good heat stability. They tend to be very good from a dispersion properties perspective, and they making it a very good choice for plastics and coatings in there. In here. So I mentioned earlier on about the TiO2 photodegradation, and I'll reiterate it here, that this chemistry is not impacted by the TiO2 photodegradation properties. So if you need more of a pastel or medium mid-shade colorant, and you do have a need for exterior weatherability, this chemistry would be the proper choice over, say, a 139, which has a very similar color, but has a poorer performance with respect to TiO2. So for Cirsham, we have a rather large portfolio of yellow 110s in our space, a number of them for coatings, 1 transparent, as well as 3 opaque versions. And in the plastics area, we have a couple of options. Both of these are FDA approved and have very high heat stability. So a broad range of plastic polymers are capable for the yellow 110 space. Again, a similar comparison between the opaque and transparent grades of yellow 110. Here we see the shape being a little bit different between the opaque and transparent, where the transparent is much more needle-like versus the opaque grade, with the aspect ratio being greater than 3 versus the opaque being at 2. You can also see this with respect to the diameter, with the transparent grade being smaller than the opaque, but not as great as what we saw with the yellow 110. The Perylene is a mid-shade orange pigment. This chemistry does provide high strength and very good heat resistance and light fastness. It has excellent fastness to weathering, primarily used for coatings and plastics applications. And moving into the Perylene family of high-performance pigments, polycyclic high-performance pigments, with the with the pigment red 179. This is a yellow shade maroon pigment, a fairly unique color position. This pigment does have excellent light and weather fastness, with good solvent resistance as well. Like the Pigment Red 177, its transparency lends itself to work very well with effect pigments. Primarily, this CI is used in coatings applications, but if your ink or plastics applications require a good weather-resistant type of pigment for exterior applications, then this might be a pigment that might be of interest as well. The other Perylene that I brought here today to review is the Pigment Black 32. This is a mid-range black pigment with a neutral to blue undertone. You'll notice that even with this picture on your computer screen, the color, the full tone color is not very jet at all, like a carbon black would be. So from that aspect of it, you're very limited to your full tone blackness color that you will receive by using the Pigment Black 32. However, this particular chemistry provides reflectivity in the IR range. So if you need to have the IR reflectivity in your formulation as one of your properties, then this might be a space where you will do well with. It does have good heat resistance and weathering properties, and primarily is being used in coatings and plastics for those IR reflectivity niche markets that I spoke about. The Pigment Yellow 138, the quinacridone family of pigments, is a green shade yellow pigment, probably the greenest high performance organic yellow pigment that's available. This pigment has high light and heat resistance with good weather fastness. Primarily, it's used in coatings and plastics. However, if your ink formulation demands good weatherability and light fastness with that very green shade, this might be a pigment of choice in your formulation for ink. From Cedar Sham perspective, we are very honored and pleased to add this brand new chemistry to our portfolio. This is our Pseudoperm Yellow 3030C. Recently just launched the coatings version and are expecting the plastics version to be launched very soon, and followed up by an ink version as well. And again, these lovely TEN pictures, you'll note that the this crystal shape is again another barrel-shaped pigment, a little bit more shorter and squatter in here, with an average diameter of about 128 nanometers. Looking at our overall portfolio, the polycyclic high performance pigments fall into our Pseudoperm line of pigments, and you can see where they fit in with respect to their value in use as well as their performance aspects of it. And from a color position, I did mention this earlier, but I did wanted to give you the opportunity to compare and contrast as far as color positioning in the yellow space. I mentioned the yellow 138 is the greenest of the high performance pigments, and you can see where it fits in the yellow space, whereas the yellow 139 and the yellow 110 are on the red side of the yellow space. And similarly, we talked about the red 177 as being on the blue side, so you can see where that fits in with respect to other red pigments. And then lastly, in the violet space, you can see where the violet 23 fits in comparison to other violet pigments. So earlier in April, we talked about the quinacridone pigments, and the beta crystal of the violet 19 being the blue shade. In comparison, it's quite red with respect to the violet 23. So next up, in August, we will shake things up a little bit differently, where we're going to have 2 webinars in the month of August. On August 10th, we will have an application specific for powder coatings. And this is in advance of the powder coating summit that's being held in September, which we will be presenting a paper there as well. And then on August 31st, we will have a plastics specific, application specific webinar in advance of the CAD RETEC, which is also being held in September, which we will be presenting a paper there as well. So look for those invitations about a week ahead of time for those webinars. So because September is going to be busy, we are taking the month of September off with this webinar series. We will get back into it in October, where we will jump over to inorganic pigments and start to review some of our CICP pigments that we are in the process of launching as we speak. So look for those in the coming months. Certainly can't do this alone. We've got a great North American team, so you can certainly reach out to any one of us with any question or any need that you might have. We're here to help. Just reach out to us and make that connection. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions that you might have, and then we can take it from there. I don't see any questions there, so at this point I will close the session, but certainly you can reach out to any one of us if you come across a question that you didn't come up with during the webinar. Certainly reach out to me and I'd be happy to help. So at this point, I'd like to thank you for your time. Your participation is always welcome. And we appreciate you giving us this time. And we look forward to seeing you in August for our 2 application-specific webinars. And thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Oh, you're quite
Thanks,
welcome.
Bonnie.